house had been quiet when they moved in, a silence so profound it felt unnatural. The real estate agent had gushed about its history, how it had stood for nearly a century, how its bones were strong, how it was a piece of history waiting for new memories to be made. The Thompsons had felt lucky to find it. It was large, affordable, and isolated enough that they wouldn't be bothered by noisy neighbors. For the first few weeks, life was as expected. They unpacked, settled in, and began making the old house their own. But then, one night, as the wind howled against the windows, they heard it, a faint creaking, a shuffle, something just on the edge of sound. At first, they dismissed it. Houses settle, old wood shifts, things creak. But it didn't stop. The noises were faint, intermittent, and always above them. It was the soft, deliberate pressure of something moving, step by step. They listened, ears straining, glancing at one another. It almost sounded like footsteps, but that didn't make sense. Their house was a 2-story building with bedrooms on the second floor. Above them, there was nothing but the roof. No attic, no crawl space, just beams and shingles. Yet, the sounds persisted. Each night, just as the house had begun to settle, the noises would start again. Light footsteps, shifting weight, something pacing just out of reach. Sometimes it sounded like something being dragged, just barely, as if a hand brushed along the ceiling. At first, they tried to ignore it. Perhaps an animal had gotten inside, a raccoon or a stray cat. They would call someone to check if it continued. But that first night passed, and the second, and by the third, the sounds had grown clearer. One night, as the clock ticked past midnight, the floor above groaned. It was loud, deliberate, as if something heavy had stepped down. The family tensed. The sound of slow, careful movement filled the air. One step, then another. A pause, then a long, dragging scrape. The father walked the house, checking every door and window, searching for any sign of an intruder. But everything was locked. The mother pressed her ear against the ceiling, breath held. She could hear it, a slow, shuffling sound above her. But how? There was nothing up there. It should have been impossible. They searched the house in daylight, running their hands along the ceilings, knocking for hidden compartments. There was nothing. No access panels, no attic entrance, just solid wood and plaster. Yet, the sounds continued. Some nights, they were light, almost imperceptible. Other nights, they were insistent, a steady pacing above them. It always began around the same time, as if whatever was making them waited for the house to fall still before it moved. They tried to rationalize it. It must be the house shifting, or perhaps rodents within the walls. But the noises didn't fit those explanations. It wasn't scratching or scurrying. It was footsteps, slow, deliberate, pressing down as if something were walking just above their heads. And then, one night, it stopped. Silence filled the house, thick and unnatural. It was almost worse than the noises. It was the kind of silence that carried weight, that pressed against the walls like something was waiting. They tried to sleep, telling themselves it was over. But deep in the night, the sound returned. This time, it was different. It was no longer confined to a single spot. It moved. It walked above their rooms, pausing, listening. Then, it descended. The ceiling groaned as the weight shifted, moving from one part of the house to another, and then something knocked, a slow, rhythmic tap against the ceiling. Once, twice, then silence. A breath later, it started again. Something was up there, and it knew they were listening. The house no longer felt like theirs. Every night, the noises grew louder. What had started as faint creaks and distant footsteps had become something undeniable. It was pacing more, lingering in certain spots as if it was listening to them. The weight of it pressing against the ceiling was too deliberate, too real. There was no attic, no crawl space, but something was there. Each night it started at the same time. A soft thump, then another. The pattern varied, but the intent felt the same. Some nights it moved quickly, darting from one end of the house to the other, as if it was searching for something. Other nights it was slow, dragging itself step by step, making sure they heard every movement. One night, as they lay in bed, the mother swore she heard breathing, a slow, ragged exhale, as if something was crouched just above her, waiting. The sound was so close, it made her skin crawl. She couldn't sleep. None of them could. The children stopped sleeping in their own rooms. They huddled together in the master bedroom, listening to the weight above shift, shuffle, pause. The father tried to act like it was nothing, but the strain in his face betrayed him. The fear in the house was thick, tangible. Then the knocking started again. It wasn't random anymore. It followed them. If they stayed in the living room, it would knock above them. If they went to the kitchen, it followed. No matter where they went, it adjusted. It wanted them to hear. It wanted them to know it was there. They tried to investigate. They tapped at the ceiling, knocked back. Sometimes there was no response. Other times there was a single, deliberate knock in reply. The father climbed onto the highest ladder he could find and pressed his hand to the ceiling. He knocked, listening for a hollow space, but the wood was solid. No hidden compartments, no false panels, just the ceiling, thick and impenetrable. Yet at night, they still heard it move. Then, things began to change. It started small. Objects went missing. Keys, shoes, small trinkets. Then, they would reappear somewhere impossible. A set of keys found balanced on a ceiling fan blade. A child's toy stuffed into a vent. Things they hadn't touched for months, suddenly lying in the middle of the floor. They set up cameras, but the footage showed nothing. Just empty rooms, long stretches of silence. But still, the sounds persisted. Then, the shadows began to shift. At night, when the house was dark, they would see movement in the corners of their vision. A flicker, a shape, something too quick to catch but too solid to be their imagination. A black mass just at the edge of the light. One evening, the mother turned on the hallway light, just in time to see something pull back, something dark, something tall. She screamed, but by the time her husband ran to check, nothing was there. Just empty space. Just the lingering sense that something had been standing there, watching. The father refused to admit something was wrong. He blamed exhaustion, stress. But the mother knew better. The children whispered about something crawling in the shadows, about a shape that didn't belong. And then came the night. They saw it. The youngest child woke up screaming, pointing at the ceiling. The family rushed to her, trying to calm her, but she only sobbed, pointing, shaking. And then, they all heard it. The ceiling groaned. Not a creak, not a settling sound. A weight shifting, something pressing against it. Then, the scratching started. Long, deliberate drags of nails, or something like nails, scraping against the ceiling, circling the room. Slow, methodical. The mother clutched her children. The father grabbed a flashlight, shining it toward the ceiling as if that would help. But there was nothing to see, just the steady, slow sound of something scraping. Then, the ceiling bulged. Just slightly, just enough to see. The plaster, the wood, it pushed downward, as if something above was pressing against it, trying to force its way through. They ran. They fled the room, huddling in the living room, too terrified to go back upstairs. But the noises didn't stop. They could hear it moving, dragging itself across the ceiling, knocking as it went. By dawn, it stopped. The house fell silent once more, but the ceiling in their daughter's room had changed. The paint was cracked, the plaster was splintered, and in the center of the damage, a single, long, dark handprint. The house was no longer a home. It was a trap, a thing that watched, that listened, that waited. The family no longer spoke of the sounds. There was no point. They were past explanations, past denial. Something was in the ceiling, something that should not have been there. They tried to leave. They packed their bags, gathered their children, and drove away without looking back. But the moment they crossed the county line, the car sputtered, died. The mechanics found nothing wrong. They tried again. The same thing happened. The house would not let them go. So they returned. And the moment they stepped inside, the air felt heavier, thick like a storm pressing down. The house was waiting. The noises grew worse. No longer just footsteps. No longer just scratching. The weight of it pressed downward. The ceilings sagged. Wood groaned. The shape of something shifted above them, restless. Then, one night, it happened. The father could not take it anymore. He grabbed a crowbar, a flashlight, anything that could be used to pry open whatever space was above them. If the house would not let them leave, then he would force the thing out. The family watched as he positioned the ladder beneath the ceiling, where the handprint had been. The mark had darkened, deepened, spreading like a bruise across the plaster. The wood beneath it bulged, warped as if something was pressing down, breathing. He climbed, slowly. The light shook in his hands. He reached up, pressing against the ceiling, and it felt soft, wrong. With a deep breath, he wedged the crowbar into the plaster and pulled. The ceiling cracked, dust rained down. A space appeared, and then a hand shot through. It was not a human hand. Too long, too thin, fingers stretching unnaturally, bones pressing against too pale skin, nails blackened, sharp. It grasped blindly, reaching, clawing. The father screamed, tumbling from the ladder. The thing above scrambled, pushing, forcing itself through. The ceiling splintered, buckled. A face emerged, eyes too wide, too hollow, a mouth stretched too far, grinning, teeth uneven, jagged, skin pale, almost translucent. And then the rest of it poured through, limbs too long, joints bending the wrong way, body twisted and broken, yet moving with terrible purpose. It dropped to the floor, silent. It stood there, staring. And then it smiled. The lights flickered. The walls groaned. The house itself seemed to breathe. The family could not move, could not scream. The thing tilted its head, studying them, as if it had been waiting for this moment, as if it had always known this would happen. And then it stepped forward,